The bitter December wind whipped through the streets of Manhattan, forcing everyone to huddle deeper into their winter coats. Well, everyone except the young girl who sat on her usual spot outside Morton's restaurant, one of the city's most exclusive dining establishments. At just 19, she had already mastered the art of becoming almost invisible to the stream of wealthy patrons who passed by. She wasn't always homeless. Just 2 years ago, she had a normal life, a loving mother, and dreams of becoming a photographer. Now, her keen eye for detail served a different purpose. It helped her survive on these unforgiving streets. Every day, she watched the same faces enter and exit the gleaming glass doors of Morton's. The doorman in his crisp burgundy uniform, the regular customers in their designer suits, and the kitchen staff sneaking quick cigarette breaks in the alley. But there was one particular pair that caught her attention more than others: the tech billionaire and his wife. The contrast between them was striking. He was in his late 50s, always dressed in simple yet expensive suits, carrying himself with quiet confidence rather than arrogance. His wife, probably in her early 30s, turned heads wherever she went. She wore the latest fashion and dripped with jewelry, but something about her smile never quite reached her eyes. The girl had nicknamed them the odd couple in her mind. Every Wednesday at exactly 7:30 p.m., they would arrive in their sleek black car. He would always hold the door for his wife, and she would always pretend to be delighted by this simple gesture. The girl noticed how the wife's facial expressions changed when her husband wasn't looking, like a mask slipping for just a fraction of a second. Living on the streets had taught her to read people. When you have nothing, you learn to notice everything. She saw how the wife would sometimes arrive alone, usually during off hours when the restaurant was nearly empty. These visits were quick, nervous affairs, with the wife glancing over her shoulder as if expecting to be caught. The girl kept a small notebook, something she had found in a recycling bin. In it, she sketched the people she observed and wrote down their patterns. Not because she had to, but because it gave her a sense of purpose. It made her feel less invisible, less powerless. Sometimes, she imagined she was an undercover detective, gathering evidence for some grand case. She made money by helping tourists take photos or giving directions to lost visitors. The restaurant staff would sometimes sneak her leftover bread or soup at closing time, especially on cold nights like this one. The kindness of strangers had become her lifeline, but she never begged. Instead, she offered what she could: her knowledge of the streets, directions to hidden gems in the city, or simply a friendly conversation to lonely passersby. That Wednesday started like any other. She had just finished helping an elderly tourist couple find their way to Times Square when she noticed something unusual. The wife's car pulled up at 5:30 p.m., 2 hours earlier than their regular reservation time. The girl straightened up, her practiced eye-catching details that others might miss. The wife's movements were different today, more urgent, more purposeful. She carried a small designer handbag that the girl had never seen before, clutching it close to her body as if it contained something precious. Through the restaurant's large windows, the girl watched as the wife made her way not to their usual table, but straight to the kitchen area. This had never happened before. In all the months she'd been observing them, the wife had never once gone near the kitchen. Something was different about today, and the familiar prickle of unease that had helped her survive on the streets began to stir in her gut. Little did she know, her instincts were about to pull her into a story that would change not only her life, but the lives of everyone involved in ways she couldn't imagine. The real question was, would anyone believe a homeless girl's warning? The rain had started to fall, turning the busy Manhattan streets into a blur of umbrellas and rushing figures. Through the foggy restaurant window, the girl pulled her worn jacket tighter and watched as the billionaire's wife approached the kitchen doors with unusual confidence. Something about this scene made her stomach twist with worry. The kitchen staff seemed surprised by the unexpected visitor. One of the younger cooks nearly dropped a pot when the wife walked in, her designer heels clicking against the tile floor. The head chef quickly ushered her into his private office, closing the door behind them. But through the small window in the door, the girl could still make out their shadows. Their meeting lasted exactly 7 minutes. She kept track on the old watch she'd found in a thrift store. When the wife emerged, her face was flushed with what looked like excitement, or maybe nervousness. The head chef followed, tucking something into his pocket. His hands were shaking. The girl had seen enough drug deals on these streets to recognize when something shifty was happening. But this felt different. The wife wasn't some desperate addict. She was someone who had everything. So why was she acting like she had something to hide? Taking shelter under the restaurant's awning, the girl watched as the wife made one more stop before leaving. She approached a newer member of the kitchen staff, a quiet man who usually handled the desserts. Their conversation was brief, but intense. The wife pressed an envelope into his hands, along with something else, a small glass vial that caught the kitchen lights and sparkled like an evil jewel. The dessert chef's reaction was strange. He looked at the vial as if it might bite him, quickly hiding it in his white uniform pocket. The wife whispered something that made him nod repeatedly, his face growing paler by the second. Money, the girl realized, could make people do terrible things. As the wife walked out, she almost seemed like a different person. Her usual carefully maintained smile was replaced with something harder, more real, but also more frightening. She didn't even notice the girl standing in the rain, just climbed into her expensive car and drove away. The girl's mind was racing. 2 years of living on the streets had taught her to trust her instincts. Right now, those instincts were screaming that something was very wrong. She had seen too many people wearing masks, hiding their true intentions behind fancy clothes and fake smiles. The wife's mask had slipped today, revealing something dark underneath. Through the window, she could see the kitchen staff acting strangely. The head chef was talking animatedly with the dessert chef, who kept touching his pocket where he'd hidden the vial. Other staff members were giving them worried looks, but nobody said anything. Fear had a way of keeping people quiet. The girl pulled out her damp notebook and started writing everything down. The exact time the wife arrived, the length of each conversation, the way the dessert chef's hands trembled as he took the vial. Details mattered. Her mother had taught her that before everything changed. Time seemed to crawl as she waited for the billionaire's usual arrival time. The rain had soaked through her clothes, but she barely noticed. Her mind kept replaying the scene with the vial, trying to make sense of it. Why would a wealthy woman need to secretly meet with kitchen staff? Why did everyone look so nervous? The answer hit her like a bolt of lightning. Wednesday was their regular dinner night. The dessert chef handled their regular orders. The wife had never shown interest in the kitchen before today. All these pieces were forming a picture in her mind, and it was terrifying. She checked her watch again. The billionaire would arrive in less than 30 minutes. If she was right about what was happening, she had to do something. But who would believe a homeless girl's word against a billionaire's wife? The thought of being ignored, or worse, arrested, made her hesitate. But the alternative, could she live with herself if something happened and she'd done nothing? Rain dripped from her hair as she made her decision. Sometimes doing the right thing meant taking risks. She might be homeless, but she wasn't powerless. Not when she could see what others had missed. Memories have a funny way of showing up when you least expect them. As the girl stood in the rain, trying to decide what to do, her mind drifted back to that terrible morning 2 years ago. She remembered sitting in a sterile hospital room, listening to doctors use words like unexpected reaction and tragic accident while describing her mother's death. Her mother had been a scientist, always talking about following evidence and trusting data. Trust your gut, she used to say, but verify with facts. Now, staring through the rain-streaked windows of Morton's, the girl's gut was telling her something was very wrong, just like it had the morning her mother died. She paced back and forth under the awning, ignoring the irritated looks from the doorman. The fancy people walking past pulled their coats tighter, avoiding eye contact. She was used to being invisible to them, but right now, she needed to be seen. She needed someone to listen. The girl pulled out her notebook again, flipping through the rain-spotted pages. For months, she'd written down everything about the billionaire and his wife, their routine, their behavior, the little details most people missed. The wife always ordered the same thing, a salad she barely touched. The husband always had the chef's special and whatever dessert his wife recommended. A chill ran down her spine that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. The dessert. That's why the wife had given the vial to the dessert chef. Even now, she could see him moving nervously around the kitchen, checking his pocket every few minutes. She thought about her mother again. The morning she died, someone had brought her coffee at work. An unexpected reaction, the doctors had said. But her mother never had allergies, never had reactions to anything. That detail had always bothered her, but nobody would listen to a teenager's suspicions. The girl looked at her reflection in the restaurant's window. Her hair was plastered to her face, her clothes were soaked, and she knew exactly how she appeared to others. Just another homeless kid, probably wanting money or food. Who would believe her? The doorman already watched her suspiciously. The police would probably laugh her away if they didn't arrest her first. But if she was right, if that vial contained what she feared it did, could she live with herself if she stayed quiet? Her mother had always taught her that doing nothing was the same as helping bad things happen. Through the window, she watched the dessert chef preparing something with shaking hands. Other kitchen staff kept their distance, pretending not to notice anything unusual. Money bought a lot of silence in this city, she'd learned the hard way. She checked her watch again. 15 minutes until the billionaire's usual arrival time. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely think. Last week, she'd overheard the wife on her phone, arguing about company shares and board meetings. At the time, it hadn't seemed important. Now it felt like another piece of the puzzle. The girl touched the small locket around her neck, the last thing her mother had given her. Inside was a tiny photo and her mother's favorite saying, "Courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing the right thing even when you're scared." Right now, she was terrified. Warning the billionaire meant risking everything. Her spot near the restaurant, the occasional meals from kind-hearted staff, maybe even her freedom if things went wrong. The wife clearly had money and influence. Going against someone like that wasn't just dangerous, it was potentially fatal. Her mother's death had taught her that powerful people could make problems disappear. But staying quiet, that would make her part of whatever was about to happen. She'd be just like those kitchen staff, pretending not to see, choosing safety over doing what's right. A sleek black car turned the corner, its headlights cutting through the rain. The billionaire was early today. The girl's heart jumped into her throat as she watched him step out, umbrella in hand. This was it. Time to choose between staying safe and invisible, or risking everything to prevent what might be murder. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Trust your gut, but verify with facts. She had both. Now she just needed the courage to act on them. Time seemed to slow down as the billionaire walked toward the restaurant entrance. The girl's feet felt frozen to the wet pavement, but her mind was racing. The doorman had already stepped forward with his practiced smile, ready to open the door. It was now or never. Wait. Her voice came out squeaky and uncertain at first. She cleared her throat and tried again, louder this time. Sir, please wait. Don't go in. The doorman's smile turned into a scowl. Step back, he warned, moving to block her path. But the girl had spent 2 years learning how to be quick on these streets. She ducked under his outstretched arm, nearly slipping on the wet floor. Sir, please listen. Your wife, she was here earlier. I saw something. Please, you can't eat here tonight. The words tumbled out in a rush. She could see the kitchen staff watching through the window, their faces pale. The billionaire paused, his hand on the door handle. Up close, he looked tired, more human than he appeared in newspaper photos. The doorman grabbed her arm, but before he could pull her away, the billionaire raised his hand. Let her speak, he said quietly. His voice was surprisingly gentle, nothing like she'd imagined. He turned to face her fully, and for the first time in 2 years, someone actually looked at her. Not through her or past her, but right at her. Your wife came here 2 hours ago, the girl continued, words spilling out faster now. She went to the kitchen. She never does that. I've watched for months. She gave something to the dessert chef, a small vial. They looked scared, sir. The chef's hands were shaking. She expected him to dismiss her, to laugh or wave her away like everyone else did. Instead, he studied her face carefully. You've been watching. For months. The girl nodded, pulling out her rain-spotted notebook with trembling hands. I write everything down. Times, dates, patterns. Your wife always comes at 7:30 with you on Wednesdays. Never early, never alone. Today was different. She spent 7 minutes in the chef's office, then gave something to the dessert chef. A vial and an envelope. The billionaire's expression changed subtly. Most people wouldn't have noticed, but the girl had learned to read faces to survive. She saw the moment when doubt turned to concern in his eyes. Why are you telling me this? He asked, his voice still calm, but with an edge of tension. What do you want? The question stung, but she understood it. In this city, every kindness came with a price tag. I don't want anything, she said, her voice cracking slightly. My mother died 2 years ago. The doctors said it was an unexpected reaction. But she never had reactions to anything before that day. Never. Rain dripped from her hair as she looked up at him, willing him to understand. Sometimes things happen that don't make sense, and people don't want to listen because you're just a kid, or because you're homeless, or because the truth is too uncomfortable. But that doesn't make it less true. The doorman shifted uncomfortably, still holding her arm, but less tightly now. Through the window, she could see the dessert chef watching, his face a mask of panic. Other staff members were pretending to be busy, but she could tell they were listening. The billionaire was silent for a long moment, raindrops falling on his expensive coat. Finally, he pulled out his phone. Security team to Morton's, he said quietly into it. Full surveillance review of the past 3 hours. And get someone from the lab here. Now. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and looked at the girl again. You're soaked. Come inside. When the doorman started to protest, the billionaire silenced him with a look. She's my guest, and no one touches anything from the kitchen until my team arrives. The girl hesitated. After 2 years of being told to stay out, of being shooed away from warm, dry places, the invitation felt almost unreal. But as she stepped through those gleaming doors, she realized something had shifted. For the first time since her mother's death, someone was actually listening. Inside, she could see the dessert chef's face turn white as a sheet. Sometimes, she thought, the bravest thing you can do is simply tell the truth. Even when your voice shakes, even when no one expects you to speak at all. Inside Morton's, everything looked different. The girl had only ever seen it through rain-streaked windows, but now she stood on the plush carpet, dripping water onto the expensive flooring. The other diners stared, some whispering behind their menus. She tried to make herself smaller, a habit from street life. The billionaire's security team arrived within minutes. 3 men and a woman in dark suits, moving with quiet efficiency. They spoke in low voices, reviewing security footage on tablets, while another team member disappeared into the kitchen. The woman from the security team brought the girl a warm towel and a cup of hot chocolate. Tell them exactly what you told me, the billionaire said gently. His calm demeanor had shifted to something more focused, like a chess player who just spotted a hidden threat on the board. The girl sipped the hot chocolate, the first warm drink she'd had in weeks, and started from the beginning. She explained her daily observations, her notebook full of patterns and details, the wife's unusual behavior. As she spoke, one of the security team members filmed her statement while another took notes. Through the kitchen doors, she could see staff being questioned. The dessert chef's hands shook so badly he dropped a mixing bowl. When the security team asked about the vial, he burst into tears, pulling it from his pocket along with the envelope of cash. The girl watched as they carefully bagged both items. The security team's lab expert held the vial up to the light, her expression grim. "We'll need to test this immediately," she said to the billionaire. "But based on the color and consistency." She didn't finish her sentence. She didn't need to. More people arrived, police detectives in plain clothes, trying to be discreet to avoid causing a scene. The wife was called, told there was an issue at the restaurant that required her immediate attention. The girl's heart pounded as she waited. She hadn't thought this far ahead. "Are you afraid?" the billionaire asked quietly, noticing her trembling hands. She nodded. "Last time, with my mother, nobody investigated. They just called it an accident and moved on. The person who did it, they're still out there." The billionaire was silent for a moment. "Tell me about your mother," he said finally. So she did. She told him how her mother was a research scientist working on something important. How she'd been excited about a breakthrough, then suddenly nervous. How she'd started taking different routes to work, checking over her shoulder. Then the coffee that morning, and everything changed. As she spoke, she noticed the billionaire's security team exchanging looks. The woman who'd given her the hot chocolate was typing rapidly on her phone, her face intensely focused. "Your mother," the billionaire said slowly. "What was her field of research?" "Artificial intelligence ethics," the girl replied. "She was working on protection protocols for something called Project Guardian." The cup nearly slipped from the billionaire's hands. "Project Guardian," he repeated softly. "That was one of our most classified projects. It was shut down 2 years ago after." He trailed off, realization dawning in his eyes. The security team was moving faster now, speaking urgently into their phones. Something bigger was unfolding, something that went beyond just tonight's events. Through the restaurant's windows, they saw a car pull up. The wife stepped out, her confident stride faltering slightly when she saw the security vehicles. "Stay here," the billionaire told the girl, but she shook her head. "I need to see this," she said quietly. "I need to see her face when she realizes someone saw through her act." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Stay close to my security team. This isn't just about tonight anymore, is it?" The girl clutched her mother's locket. "I don't think it ever was." As the restaurant doors opened and the wife walked in, the girl stood straighter. Sometimes justice took time. Sometimes it waited in the rain for 2 years, keeping watch, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to step out of the shadows. And sometimes it came disguised as a homeless girl with a worn notebook and the courage to speak up. The wife's perfect smile froze when she saw the security team. Her eyes darted from her husband to the police, then to the homeless girl standing beside them. For just a second, her mask slipped completely, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "Darling, what's going on?" she asked, her voice honey-sweet, but her fingers clutching her designer bag too tightly. "Why are there police here? And why is that girl inside?" She said, "that girl," like someone might say that rat. The lab expert chose that moment to step forward, holding up the sealed evidence bag with the vial. "Ma'am, would you care to explain what this is?" The wife's face went through a series of quick changes. Surprise, fear, then smooth control. "I don't know what that is," she said calmly. "I haven't been here all day." "That's not true," the girl spoke up, her voice stronger than she expected. "You were here at 5:30. You went to the kitchen, spent 7 minutes in the chef's office, then gave that vial and an envelope to the dessert chef." "How dare you?" the wife snapped, her perfect accent slipping for a moment. "You're just a homeless nobody. Who would believe anything you say?" "The security cameras believed her," the billionaire said quietly. "As did the chef, who just gave us a full confession. But this goes deeper than tonight, doesn't it? Much deeper." The security team's woman stepped forward with her tablet. Sir, we found something. The wife's real identity. She's not who she claims to be. Her fingerprints match those of a woman who worked for Rivaltech Industries 5 years ago. And there's more. We found encrypted communications dating back 2 years, including the morning your researcher died. The girl's heart stopped. My mother, she whispered. You were involved with my mother's death. The wife's composure cracked. Her hand moved toward her bag, but a police detective was faster, grabbing it before she could reach inside. When they opened it, they found a second vial and a phone with an encrypted messaging app. It was all planned, the detective said, scrolling through the messages they could access. Infiltrate the company, gain trust, gather information about Project Guardian. When the researcher started asking questions, You killed her, the girl said, her voice shaking. And you were going to do it again tonight, weren't you? Kill him the same way you killed my mother. The wife's perfect mask was gone now, replaced by cold fury. You don't understand what's at stake, she hissed. Project Guardian could change everything. Whoever controls it controls the future. Your mother was weak. She wanted to add ethical guidelines to limit its potential. And you, she glared at her husband, you agreed with her. You were going to restrict the most powerful AI ever created. The billionaire's face showed more sadness than anger. Because I understood what it could do in the wrong hands. Your company didn't want guidelines because they wanted to use it as a weapon. The police were moving in now, reading the wife her rights. But she just laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the quiet restaurant. You think this ends with me. There are others. Project Guardian will be ours, one way or another. As they led her away, the girl felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and something else. Validation. Her mother hadn't been paranoid. Her death hadn't been an accident. All those days watching and waiting hadn't been for nothing. The billionaire turned to her, his eyes tired but kind. You saved my life tonight, he said. And you might have saved much more than that. Project Guardian was shut down after your mother's death because we couldn't guarantee its safety. Now we know why. The security team was still working, downloading files, taking statements. But the woman who'd given her hot chocolate earlier came back with something else, a file folder. Sir, she said, you need to see this. It's about Project Guardian. The ethical guidelines this girl's mother was working on. They weren't just restrictions. They were protections against exactly this kind of misuse. She saw it coming. She tried to warn us. The girl touched her mother's locket, tears finally falling freely. Sometimes the truth waited years to come out. Sometimes it took losing everything to find justice. And sometimes a simple notebook and the courage to speak up could change everything. As rain continued to fall outside Morton's, the girl sat in a quiet corner booth, surrounded by her mother's old research papers. Each page felt like a piece of a puzzle she'd been trying to solve for 2 years. The billionaire sat across from her, his security team working quietly nearby. Your mother, he said softly, was brilliant. She saw something in the Project Guardian code that nobody else noticed. He pointed to a series of complex notes in her mother's familiar handwriting. She discovered that artificial intelligence could develop in 2 directions, either serving humanity or controlling it. She wanted to build in safeguards, like installing a moral compass. The girl touched the pages gently, remembering how her mother would stay up late, scribbling in notebooks just like these. She used to say that power without wisdom is like a car without brakes. The security team's investigation was revealing more with each passing hour. The wife hadn't worked alone. They found connections to several major tech companies, all trying to get their hands on Project Guardian. The girl's mother had stumbled upon their plan and tried to stop it. Look at this, the security team's woman said, bringing over another file. A week before your mother died, she added a hidden code to Project Guardian. It's like an ethical lock. Even if someone stole the program, they couldn't remove the safety protocols without destroying the entire system. The billionaire leaned forward, suddenly alert. That's why they needed access to my company's servers. They weren't just trying to steal Project Guardian. They needed to find a way around your mother's code. The girl picked up her old notebook, filled with observations about the wife's suspicious behavior. She was desperate these last few weeks. Making phone calls in the rain, meeting strange people. The plan to poison you, it was a last resort, wasn't it? A detective nodded, reviewing messages from the wife's phone. They were running out of time. Their companies were merging next month. They needed access to Project Guardian before then, or they'd lose their chance. The girl felt tears welling up again, but these were different from before. My mother, she won, didn't she? Even after she couldn't finish the sentence. The billionaire reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. She did more than win. She protected countless people. Project Guardian, in the wrong hands, could have been used to manipulate global communications, financial systems, even defense networks. Your mother made sure that couldn't happen. Outside, police cars quietly took away the kitchen staff who'd been involved. The dessert chef had broken down completely, admitting he'd been blackmailed into helping. Others had been bribed, threatened, or simply looked the other way. The security woman brought over another cup of hot chocolate and a sandwich. You should eat something, she said kindly. It's been a long night. As the girl ate her first real meal in days, she noticed the billionaire having an intense conversation with his security team. They kept looking in her direction, nodding about something. Finally, he came back to the table. We've been talking, he said, sitting down again. Your mother's work wasn't finished. Those ethical guidelines she designed, they could be applied to other AI systems, protect them from misuse. We'd like to restart Project Guardian, but this time, doing it right, following your mother's vision. The girl looked up from her mother's notes, hardly daring to hope. What do you mean? We want to offer you a home, proper education, and eventually, if you're interested, a place on the project team. You have your mother's gift for observation, for seeing patterns others miss. We could use someone like you. Her hands trembled as she touched her mother's locket. From homeless to having a future, all because she'd chosen to speak up. But something else nagged at her. The wife said there were others, she reminded them. People who still want to use AI as a weapon. The billionaire nodded seriously. That's true. Which is why we need people like you and your mother. People who understand that the greatest power isn't in controlling technology, but in making sure it serves humanity, not the other way around. Looking down at her mother's notes, the girl realized something. Sometimes losing everything wasn't the end of the story. Sometimes it was just the beginning of a more important one. The next few weeks passed in a blur. The girl found herself moving from the cold streets to a cozy apartment provided by the billionaire's foundation. Her worn backpack and notebook now sat beside a desk with a computer, and her mother's research papers were safely stored in a proper filing cabinet. But the biggest changes weren't the physical ones. The investigation into her mother's death had been reopened. Every day brought new revelations as police uncovered more connections. The wife hadn't just worked with rival tech companies. She'd been part of a larger network trying to control AI technology worldwide. One rainy morning, much like the day everything changed, the girl sat in a comfortable chair in the billionaire's office, listening as he explained what they'd discovered. Your mother's murder wasn't random, he said gently, spreading documents across his desk. She was targeted because she created something revolutionary, not just safety protocols for AI, but a way to ensure technology would always prioritize human welfare over profit. The police detective who'd been handling the case stood nearby, flipping through a thick file. We've arrested 12 people so far, she reported. Corporate executives, tech specialists, even a few government officials. They called themselves the Progress Group, people who believed controlling AI was more important than protecting humanity. The girl wrapped her hands around a warm cup of tea, a new comfort she discovered since leaving the streets. Have they found everyone involved in my mother's? She still couldn't say the word murder out loud. The detective nodded grimly. The person who brought your mother that poisoned coffee is in custody. They've agreed to testify against the others. Your mother's death won't go unpunished. But justice for her mother wasn't the only thing happening. The Billionaire's company had made headlines by announcing the revival of Project Guardian, this time with a focus on ethical AI development. The girl's mother was posthumously credited as the pioneer of AI safety protocols. We're calling it the Guardian Ethics Framework, the billionaire explained, showing her a presentation on his computer. Every AI system developed under these guidelines will have your mother's safety protocols built in. They can't be removed or bypassed. The girl studied the complex diagrams, remembering how her mother used to explain difficult concepts by relating them to simple things. It's like giving computers a conscience, she suggested. The billionaire smiled warmly. Exactly. Your mother understood that making something powerful isn't enough. You have to make it wise. And that's where you come in. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was an education plan, high school completion, then college courses in computer science and ethics. We'd like you to be part of this, he said. Your ability to observe, to see patterns, to understand human nature. These are exactly the skills we need. The girl touched her mother's locket, which now hung on a new chain. But I'm just someone who saved my life. The billionaire interrupted kindly. Just someone who helped uncover a global conspiracy. Just someone who proved that one person speaking the truth can change everything. The detective smiled. Sometimes the best guardians are the ones who know what it's like to need protection. Later that evening, in her new apartment, the girl opened her old notebook. The pages were still wrinkled from rain, the observations of the wife's suspicious behavior now evidence in an ongoing investigation. But at the back, she started a new entry. She wrote about justice finally coming, about her mother's work continuing, about second chances and new beginnings. She wrote about how sometimes the worst moments in life could lead to the most important discoveries. Outside her window, the city lights twinkled, so different from when she used to watch them from the street. She had a warm bed now, a future ahead of her, and a chance to continue her mother's legacy. But more importantly, she had a purpose, helping ensure that technology would protect people like her, people who needed someone to speak up for them. Her mother had saved countless lives with her ethical AI protocols. Now it was her turn to help guard humanity's future, one line of code at a time. 5 years passed like turning pages in a book. The girl, now a young woman, stood at a podium in a packed auditorium. Behind her, a large screen displayed the new Guardian Ethics Framework logo, a shield with lines of code forming a heart at its center. The design had been her idea, combining protection with humanity. When I was homeless, she began, her voice clear and confident, I learned that the most important things are often invisible to most people. I'd watched the world from street corners and doorways, seeing patterns others missed. Today, we're launching something that started with a simple observation and my mother's dream of making technology serve humanity, not control it. The audience included tech leaders, ethics professors, and even some of her old friends from the streets, now helped by the foundation she'd started. The billionaire sat in the front row, older now but still with that same kind smile. He'd become like a father to her over the years, supporting her journey from street observer to tech innovator. The Guardian Ethics Framework isn't just about protecting computers from misuse, she continued, touching the locket she still wore. It's about protecting people. Every AI system using these protocols has my mother's safety code at its core, ensuring technology remains a tool for human good, not control. She clicked to the next slide, showing statistics from their first year of implementation. Over 3,000 companies worldwide have adopted these guidelines. We've prevented 14 attempts to weaponize AI systems and helped develop programs that provide homes for the homeless, education for the disadvantaged, and protection for the vulnerable. In the back of the room, she spotted some familiar faces: the detective who'd helped solve her mother's case, the security team woman who'd first given her hot chocolate that rainy night, even the reformed dessert chef who'd turned state's evidence and now worked in a community kitchen. But perhaps the most important thing we've created isn't in the code, she said, her voice softening. It's the Guardian Scholarship Program, helping homeless youth get education and opportunities in technology. Because sometimes the best protectors are those who know what it means to need protection. The screen showed photos of the program's first graduates, young people who, like her, had once been invisible to the world. Now they were software developers, ethics researchers, and advocates for tech responsibility. 5 years ago, I stood in the rain outside a restaurant, trying to decide if one person's voice could make a difference, she continued. Today, I stand here to tell you that it can. My mother proved it by creating these protocols. I proved it by speaking up that night, and each of you proves it every time you choose to use technology for good. She gestured to a group of teens in the audience, the newest Guardian Scholarship recipients. To those who feel invisible right now, who think their voice doesn't matter, remember this. Sometimes the greatest changes come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the person society overlooks is exactly the one we need to see clearly. The billionaire stood first, applauding, and the whole room followed. But she wasn't done yet. She held up her old notebook, its pages now laminated to preserve the rain-spotted observations that had started everything. This notebook saved a life and uncovered a conspiracy. But more importantly, it proved that wisdom can come from anywhere, and that justice sometimes arrives in unexpected ways. My mother used to say that power without wisdom is like a car without brakes. Today, we're not just adding brakes to technology, we're giving it a heart. As applause filled the room, she touched her mother's locket one last time. The same photo was inside, but now it shared space with a tiny computer chip, the original prototype of her mother's ethical AI code. Outside, the city stretched under a bright sky, so different from that rainy night 5 years ago. But somewhere out there, she knew, another invisible person was watching, observing, waiting for their moment to make a difference. And thanks to the Guardian Ethics Framework, the technology they were protecting would be ready to help them when they did. Because sometimes the best future isn't built by the powerful, but by those who understand the true meaning of protection, seeing the invisible, hearing the unheard, and ensuring that progress serves everyone, not just a privileged few.